them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and try to have fun. Otherwise, what's the point? Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release, but challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. And this week, we are talking the 2013 film Kick-Ass 2. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my homemade costumed co-host, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
Yeah.
Your costume looks great, by the way. I can tell you put a lot of effort into that. What's your superhero name, Andrew?
I don't know, man. The Wild Ginger?
Wild. A bit derivative, isn't it?
Big Red Zeppelin?
Perfect. There it is.
Crimson Tide?
Andrew, what is your history with this movie, Kick-Ass 2?
I saw it once. Don't know if it was in theaters. I can't remember. I don't think it was. I did see it, though, because I did remember liking the first one more than I thought I would. And so I was curious about just how this one was going to come off, especially losing Matthew Vaughn, who I thought was a big part of why the first one was so successful. So seeing that swap for Jeff Wadlow here, I was interested in how that came out. And saw it once and have not revisited it since. So,
honestly, same. I saw this in theaters. I was a big fan of that first movie, which I also saw in theaters and really took me by surprise. Like, it just seemed like it came out of nowhere and felt so different at that time. And I was excited for a sequel. I saw this in theaters, and look, hashtag Positivity Podcast, but like, I borderline hated this movie in theaters. I really did not enjoy it. I felt like everything I liked about the first one wasn't there. That was before this hashtag Positivity Podcast, so I can say that. But watching it this week for this episode is the first time I've revisited the movie since theaters. And I'll say up front, I enjoyed it much more the second time around. There's definitely some things in here to enjoy, but no doubt it's a different vibe than that first movie.
100%. It feels, I don't mean this backhandedly, but it feels a lot more like a Mark Millar comic brought to the screen. Like you're getting something just from the dialogue, from how it all works. I think this is a lot more akin to what one of those comics looks like on the screen versus I think what Vaughn did with the first one, where he kind of took the core concept and just kind of spun it into its own thing. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like I said, there's still some great performances here. There's still some really cool scenes here. There's still plenty to dive into. So let's do it.
Let's do it. But a quick note up front. Normally, Best of the Rest, this is a family-friendly podcast. We try to watch our language. Every now and then something slips through and it's typically edited out. But this episode is going to be an uncensored episode of Best of the Rest. After all, we're talking about a rated R movie. There's literally characters' names that we wouldn't be able to say if we were censoring this episode. So this episode only, no bleeps, no cuts, no edits. We're going to be saying naughty words. So if you typically listen to this around children, I'd advise you not to for this episode because there's no censoring. Andrew, do you want to test it out? Do you want to test the censors?
Fuck!
I don't know why. Yeah, there you go, folks. Even though I teed you up for it, I wasn't expecting. I don't know. That snuck up. I thought you were gonna whisper something. Very good, Andrew.
Man, I'm fucking funny.
Man, so this is the perfect episode to tell the story on because I can tell it uncensored. A long time, like when I was like 4 years old, not even in kindergarten, my older brother, he's 4 years older than me, had a talk boy, like from Home Alone.
Yeah,
and
I have one of those.
he used it like all the time. And we were in the back seat of the car. My mom had ran in to do something, and it was just me and him in the car. It was one of my earliest memories in life. I remember so vividly. He was like, record every cuss word that you know. and I'm like a little kid, and
Yeah.
he's recording me, and I'm like whispering like, "Shit," like into his talk boy, and he. I don't know how our parents got the tape. I'm pretty sure like he ratted me out. I think his master plan
Yeah.
was to like trick me
That's
into
just
like saying these bad words and
Rookie
then
mistake,
being like,
man.
"Look, Dad, there's a tape of Chris saying bad words," and he puts the tape in a home stereo to play it.
Oh god.
And here's the thing: it's little me cussing, but I didn't know a lot of cuss words, so my older brother is feeding me the lines. He's literally like, "Say fuck," and I'm like, "Fuck." Say shit. So totally backfired on him because we both
Right.
got hella grounded. Like the worst trouble we've been in our lives up until that point. Now it's a funny story to look back on, but
Right.
Josh, you dick. But
I
it was good times.
my god. That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny.
All right, let's jump into this movie though. Kick-Ass 2, released August 16th, 2013, made on a budget of $28 million. Pretty interesting here because the first movie actually has a higher budget. Usually you crank it up a little bit for the sequel, but interesting diving into these numbers. Like in my mind, the first Kick-Ass was like a huge hit, like a really big deal, but it really was a lot more modest. It had like a $35 to $40 million budget and made in just under $100 million, like $97 million at the box office, I think. So definitely profitable, definitely worthy of a sequel, but they almost hedged their bets a little bit with that budget. They brought it down a little bit to $28 million. Probably for good reason, because at the box office, this movie brings in $60.8 million, so significantly less than that first movie, but probably still profitable at the end of the day, given that modest budget. Critically, it's not nearly as well received as that first movie, though. Just a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score is a little bit higher, 57%, but still in the rotten territory. Everyone seemed to agree this was a significant step down from that first movie.
Yeah, I feel like that was definitely the legacy at the time, and that's probably why I didn't see it in theaters. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the comics it was based off of. I wasn't, full disclosure, I don't know if I've ever said it on the show, I'm not the biggest fan of Mark Millar's writing style. Mark Millar's writing style. I think there reached a point where he just kind of started writing super violent, edgy stuff just for the sake of it being that was the whole hook. It was like, oh, what crazy violent thing is he going to do this month? And
I also feel like he had film adaptations in mind. Like once his work started getting adapted, he would write stuff with the intention
that was just intended to be a film pitch, basically, and it worked. I mean, he's had a lot of things get adapted and a lot of things get picked up, and always be closing. I'm not going to fault him for that. Third place is you're fired, but it's definitely something where that style of writing, like that's always kind of been my issue with Garth Ennis too, is just it feels like there's so much over the top, like hyper violence and grossness that you're just kind of like, all right, I get it. I'm not gonna read it anymore. And I think the best adaptations of those works are the ones that find the core idea and kind of cut away all the fat to make something interesting. And like The Boys is kind of like that. That's a Garth Ennis comic that I think finds just that right balance of getting to what the comic was about without having to do the excess. So either way, going in not being the hugest fan of the comic, the word of mouth on this, I think, turned me off of potentially seeing it in the theaters, where I was like, well, it kind of that was my mindset. I was like, well, it sounds like losing Matthew Vaughn was a big thing. It didn't quite hit the spirit of the original. So I did eventually see it, but I do think looking back and thinking now, I really don't think I saw this in theaters because the word of mouth just, I think, caught up to me. But yeah, the legacy is basically not nearly as good as the first one.
Matthew Vaughn chose not to return for the sequel. He remained as an executive producer and actually chose Jeff Wadlow to take over for Kick-Ass 2. So this movie is written and directed by Jeff Wadlow, a man that we've talked about before because he would later write the movie Bloodshot. But probably prior to this movie, probably most known for the slasher movie Cry Wolf in 2005, which was his debut. Made a few more movies in between that and Kick-Ass 2, though.
Yeah. He'd been out there, wrote and directed the martial arts film Never Back Down. it's been out and around. And yeah, I remember when it was definitely a situation where they like tried to gracefully say that Matthew Vaughn was not coming back to write and direct, but they were doing Jeff Wadlow. And I remember there was a decent amount of, I wouldn't really call it damage control, but there was definitely a lot of just like, oh no, we picked Jeff. He's the guy. Don't worry. He's good. Like, it was very much like assuaging the fans that like, this guy is a good pick and he's the right guy to do this. Like, it was very much trying to like convince all the fans, don't worry, it's in good hands. Because, you know, you look at his filmography, especially to that point, which was just a couple of short films, a few stints with some television stuff, and that just not a lot of history at that point. And I definitely remember there was some don't worry, it's taken care of. But yeah, an interesting choice.
It's interesting too because Matthew Vaughn he's a bit of an auteur filmmaker. I mean, he's really known for a very specific style that he's sort of started honing down in Kick-Ass. He's known for like these long action sequences with no cuts and this very kinetic style, like the warehouse scene with Big Daddy in the first Kick-Ass. And he would later expand on this in like his Kingsman movies. That's like the highlight of those movies are these long extended action sequences. And he just has this specific style. So for someone with such a unique vision, for someone else to do the sequel, it's like if someone else made, you know, like a sequel to a Tarantino movie or an Edgar Wright movie. It's like you're expecting a very specific thing and have someone else in control creatively altogether. It's like, do they do a imitation of the last person's style or make it their own? I don't envy the position that Jeff, well, that's not true. I very much envy the fact that he got the right and direct a motion picture. Let me take that back.
Right,
but
of course, yeah.
Regardless, it's a bit of a challenge.
It's a tough spot to be in. It's a tough spot
Yeah.
to be in because you there's expectations. Obviously, like I said, Kick-Ass wasn't like a massive success, but it's still like, you know, people liked it. It came off well. People were big fans of it. I remember everybody had a pretty good things to say about it overall. And you got to live up to that. And you've got to find a way to find that balance between kind of, I say honoring, although that feels like a weird word to use in this context. Honoring what came before, but still finding a path forward that still finds that right. You're juggling a lot of things that I don't envy. I would not want to do that at all. So, I mean, like I said, Vaughn seemed to vet this guy. He seemed to be on board with it. Miller was too. I remember Miller making plenty of his own statements that they were working on it and things were moving forward.
Let's talk about the movie we got. High schooler Dave Lazowski has decided that he wants to get serious about his superhero alter ego Kick-Ass and enlists the help of his friend Mindy McCready, aka Hit Girl, to train him. But when Mindy decides to honor her adoptive father's wishes and quits the crime-fighting game, Dave joins the ragtag group of street-level costumed heroes called Justice Forever, led by Colonel Stars and Stripes. Things get serious when Dave's former friend, Chris D'Amico, decides to become a supervillain and recruits a team of dangerous murderers and psychopaths intent on killing Kick-Ass to avenge D'Amico's father. Mindy returns to the Hit Girl persona to join Kick-Ass and the rest of New York's heroes for one final showdown.
There's a lot going on there.
Bigger stakes than the first time around. We got a whole team, not just heroes, but supervillains for the first time. This movie makes it a point to say that Chris D'Amico's character is the first supervillain, which is weird. I guess that first movie doesn't have supervillains. Like, they're heroes, but they're fighting like mob bosses and regular people.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of realization where you're like, oh, the first movie really doesn't have a quote-unquote supervillain. You've got just standard bad guys. Yeah.
A mob boss played by the greatest actor of all time, Mr. Mark Strong.
The Mark Strong himself.
The Mark Strong. This is the closest we've come to actually talking about Mark Strong, right? He's a picture in this movie. You see his picture like on a wall.
Yeah.
That picture gets my Mark Strong award for this episode.
That gets the literal Mark Strong award.
Let's jump into the cast of this movie. And of course, The way we always kick this off is by recognizing one person who has gone above and beyond the call of duty, and they elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, or at the very least, elevate the role that they were given. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Kick-Ass 2?
I'm going to go ahead and give it to Chloe Grace Moretz as Mindy McCready / Hit Girl. She was arguably the breakout star of the first film. People really thought that, she did a really great job in what was a very delicate role. And here she's continuing that role to great effect. She's trying to strike that balance of the older version of this character, and they do play with that a little bit. To be like, are there things that she's having trouble adapting to now as an adult, while still wanting to be a superhero, but having the struggles with that as well. I was like what she's doing here. She's invested in the part. I think you can clearly tell that she understands how important Hit Girl was to her career, and she wanted to keep that going the best she could, and I think she does a great job here.
I'm going to have to agree 100%. Chloe Grace Moretz also getting my Mark Strong Award, and she's great. She's awesome in everything that she's in. Definitely the first Kick-Ass was the first time I came to know who she was, but I've seen her in a million things since then. She's always knocking it out of the park. No exception here. And the movie really is built around her. She may as well be the main character of this movie. I think her story arc is so much more interesting than what Kick-Ass is going through. And she's obviously more badass. I mean, that's what the character is all about. She's like the most competent one out of all these people that are dressing up as heroes. So she gets a lot to do, and she rises to the occasion. I'm going to have to agree with you. Chloe Grace Moretz, Mark Strong Award.
I think Kick-Ass definitely was the first time she blew up, but I remember later that year she was in the Let the Right One In remake as well, and I think she's actually, first off, underrated remake. I know the original is like awesome, but the remake by Matt Reeves, pretty good. And she's very good in it. So, real 1-2 punch of Kick-Ass plus Let Me In right there in 2010, put her on the map. And
great movie.
Yeah, she's doing a great job here. In a pretty stacked cast, if I am to use the term.
There's some heavy hitters in here.
There's some heavy hitters in here, and so we'll dive into it.
Aaron Taylor Johnson returns as Dave Lazowski / Kick-Ass. Again, just like Chloe Grace Moretz, the first Kick-Ass is probably the first time he came onto my radar. First thing I recall seeing him in, but he had a lot of small parts before then and has only gotten bigger since then. He's Quicksilver in the MCU. He's in a Christopher Nolan movie. That's how you know you've made it. He's in Tenet. He
was Charlie Chaplin in Shanghai Nights. In 2003.
Saying that out loud is so weird. I watched Shanghai Night. I watched both of them, Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights, earlier this year, maybe last year, fairly recently. And I forget they did this weird. He's an orphan in Shanghai Nights, and they find out his name is Charlie Chaplin, and like that's a horrible name for an actor. They always break the fourth wall kind of stuff. And he's literally the last shot of that movie is him like sneaking away like in the back of a carriage, and he pokes his head out and like rubs his mouth like he's getting dirt off, but unintentionally smears like black grease paint under his nose to give him the little mustache. It's not subtle.
It's ridiculous.
But, that's Aaron Taylor Johnson.
And now playing Kraven the Hunter.
Who can forget in the Sony Pictures universe of Spider-Man characters minus Spider-Man?
Yes. But out there doing the same. But Kick-Ass, I think, is definitely Nowhere Boy the year before. The John Lennon biopic was one that people kind of point to as kind of one of his breakouts. But Kick-Ass was definitely, for me, the first time I was like, oh. And then he was everywhere there for a while. I remember he was in the MCU, and he was in Godzilla, and he kind of came and was there pretty heavily for a while.
Let me rewind a little bit here. You're a biopic guy, huh? Biopic? That's what you go with?
Yes,
biopic?
Because it's one word.
Biopic. Not biopic.
Just like biopic is 2 words. Biopic is 1 word.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm not going to argue
with controversy.
Yes, it's just like that. It makes total sense. Christopher Mintz-Plasse returns as Chris D'Amico. In the first movie, Andrew, he was a superhero known as the Red Mist. But now, as a supervillain, he takes on the name the motherfucker.
That's a name.
That's a name. That's hashtag positivity podcast. But there are times like I watch this movie where I'm like, is this just not my sense of humor? Am I just too old for this? Like, is this a joke, or is this like him trying to be cool? I don't quite know what they're going for, if I'm catching on to it. But one of the reasons this has to be an uncensored episode, because his very name is, again, the motherfucker. But I really like Christopher Mintz-Plasse. For someone who is, I mean, I don't think it's like insulting or backhanded to say he's a bit typecast. I mean, he plays nerdy characters. That's like his whole thing. But he's been able to do a lot with it. Of course, super bad, super memorable. McLovin. It's just one name. It just says McLovin. Still funny to me. But Role Models is genuinely one of my favorite comedies. That movie's watch super underrated. Movie like twice a year. It's so good. Movie. And he's fantastic in it. And he's great in both Kick-Ass movies. He's great here. I love him like trying to be like villainous and menacing, but it's Christopher Mintz-Plasse. It works for me. It works for me. I like it.
Yeah, it's obviously part of the character is that he's deranged now, but he's kind of being ridiculous, but he doesn't realize what he's like, how kind of ridiculous he's being, honestly. That's kind of what the character is going through here. But I think he does a great job. I think it's an interesting twist on that whole kind of insecure nerd that he normally plays, to kind of give him this completely unearned sense of importance, really, because that's kind of what it is. He's suddenly like, oh, my parents are dead. I'm the head of this crime empire, so now I'm a big deal. And like he's like saying it, but it's not really true. And so that's kind of the through line with the character through the whole movie, and he does a great job with it.
Clark Duke plays Dave's friend Marty, who is now a costume hero as well, known as Battle Guy, which is a funny name. He's got sort of a Captain America-esque skull cap with a star on it. He's definitely pretty goofy looking. Andrew, I gotta say, Clark Duke, hashtag positivity podcast. I don't like this guy. I don't think he's funny. I don't like him. I mean, personally, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but like, I find him very grating. And I think sometimes he's supposed to be that way, but sometimes he's supposed to be like genuinely funny, and it never works for me. He's in the last season of The Office. He's in that teen comedy Sex Drive. He's in the Kick-Ass movies, and I don't like this guy's vibes. They don't work for me.
I don't mind him in Hot Tub Time Machine, but that's in Hot Tub Time Machine. He's kind of the weird kid as these middle-aged men have their midlife crises. So I think it kind of works. But when he's in like amongst his peers, I kind of agree that it just feels like it doesn't really work. He's just. And it's weird because like he's also in Superbad, but he's in like a super bit part.
Oh, I don't realize
where he's the guy that like when Fogel is getting like when the cops like stage the arrest of Fogel at the end of the party, he's the guy that goes, "Wow, Fogel's a badass."
Oh yeah, that is him. It might be his greatest performance.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah, I don't feel as strongly about Clark Duke as you do. But I also haven't seen as many of the things he's in, apparently. But yeah.
Morris Chestnut plays Detective Marcus Williams, who is now the caretaker of Hit Girl, of Mindy, after her father, played by Nicolas Cage, passed away in the first movie. And turning in a solid performance as a detective, he wants her to quit the superhero game, go to school, have a normal life. Clearly cares for her deeply, but she is on her own path.
Well, he takes over this role because I'm pretty sure Morris is not in the first one. I think it's Amari Hardwick in that one. But yeah, I mean, I remember Morris Chestnut all the way from Boys in the Hood back in 1991 there. So been a while. Yeah, I think he's great actor, does a good job here. Not a whole lot to do. He's kind of just the disappointed dad that is kind of like lamenting that Hit Girl can't give up the superhero life. But yeah, good stuff.
Mark Strong Award winner John Leguizamo is in this movie as Javier. And he sort of Pseudo looks after Chris D'Amico after both of his parents are dead. His dad dying in the first one. His mom dies in this one in a tanning bed, is accidentally killed by Chris. It's a very, very odd scene, but he sort of becomes his caretaker, his Alfred, as Chris puts it. And I love seeing John Leguizamo in anything because he's one of the greatest actors ever. But I particularly like how he's always calling Chris out on his racial stereotypes as he's naming these supervillains and basing their names and their whole persona off of either their nationality or their race. And he's like, you got to stop with these stereotypes. And Chris argues they're archetypes. And I don't know if the movie is intending to do this, but it's very smart commentary to have your very rich, white, privileged character give out these names and not realize how demeaning they are. Again, I don't know if that's intentional satire and comedy, but I still appreciated it anyway.
Yeah, it's John Leguizamo. What can you say? I love pretty much everything this guy's in. And he's got some good not really inadvertent, but just some good comedic beats here. Like you said, where he kind of pushes back against some of Chris's excess to a degree. But if John Leguizamo's in it, I'm probably going to give it a watch either way.
There's another Mark Strong Award winner in this movie. Jim Carrey plays Colonel Stars and Stripes. And Andrew, I wanted to give him another Mark Strong Award here, but I like the character, I like what he's doing, but I felt like this character was building to something and we never got like a payoff for it. I wish we got a little bit more of this character, but I like it. And it's not typical Jim Carrey. It's not even really that funny. He's got some jokes and some lines that make me laugh, I'll get to, but like he's playing it pretty straight. He's playing it as like this little bit deranged former mob guy who's a born again Christian. He's always calling people out on their cursing, which is a fun little running bit. He's got, I think, a little bit of like prosthetics on the bridge of his nose. Yeah. Like he looks a little bit off, but he clearly like molded this character and really kind of got into this role. And he's playing like a very specific character that I do enjoy. I wish there was a little bit more of it. I wish there was, like I said, a big payoff scene. You're kind of waiting for something to happen, and then he gets killed, and it's very sad. But I was surprised how a big a name as Jim Carrey in this movie, how little they actually used him. But I do like what he's on screen. I like what he's doing here.
Yeah, he plays, the leader of what becomes Justice Forever, this idea of a team of superheroes made up of people that are all just inspired by Kick-Ass by and large. And yeah, it's a little bit against the grain. He's playing this, like you said, fairly straight, kind of a little bit like Will Arnett in our Jonah Hex episode. You're kind of waiting for the jokes, but they never really come. A few little, like you said, a few little kind of winks here and there by and large. But yeah, like kind of when you feel like there's going to be a big moment for the character, he dies. He gets killed by Chris and his goons. So it's an odd turn. I know Carrey had a little bit of a mixed relationship with the final film outside of this, but by and large, yeah, I do like what he's doing here. It's just he's just kind of there though. There's unfortunately not really a bigger arc for what he's got going on.
My favorite line of his, one of the outwardly comedic lines, is the first time he's showing him the big space. It's going to be like their secret meeting area.
Yeah,
he says, "Now this little renovation was totally clandestine, which means no one knew about it."
Yeah, like
explaining the word is, I don't know, it's very funny to me.
And just the fact that like this renovation of a basement he's like, it was clandestine. It's like, okay, why was it clandestine?
That's good. Yeah, I guess we should maybe mention that Jim Carrey did not do any of the promotional tours for this movie because it is and I don't know if you noticed, this is a very violent movie, like outwardly violent movie, and it's stylized, it's over the top, but it's young people and kids and normal people getting mercifully beat and using weapons, and due to a national tragedy that happened at the time, he wanted to distance himself from that, and I know he got some flack for that, but I can't. fault the guy for that.
Yeah, you
I
can't
can
fault him
certainly-
for it. I get it. And a lot of people kind of came out and I think were like, I know Mark Miller and Moretz and a couple of others all came out and were kind of very unsympathetic. I think there were people that did think his rejection of the film hurt it financially, potentially. To have one of the high profile stars kind of be like, I'm not just not going to do promotion for this, but I'm going to come out and flat out say I can't endorse the film or whatever. I don't know if there's anybody who's run the metrics on that or anything like that, but I could imagine there were definitely people that are like, oh man, one of the guys in this movie doesn't want to support it. That's kind of a red flag. But yeah, I can't fault the guy. It's definitely, like I said, I think it's fairly stylized, but at the same time, you know, he's just drawing a line for himself. He's
Gotta
not
be
wishing
true to
ill
yourself,
on the film.
man.
Yeah, and so I think I support it. But yeah, ultimately he ended up having little to do with the promotion. I know he's on one of the posters. What I find funny about the poster that he's on is that he's wearing blue for some reason, when his character does not wear blue in the film. Like on the poster, it's like, I think it's motherfucker at the bottom in black, and then it's Kick-Ass in like the green and the yellow, and Hit Girl in the purple, and then it's him in the blue, and I'm like,
Yeah.
his character does not wear blue. That's, you know, we're hyping it up for the poster, but a little strange. But yeah, it's still weird that Jim Carrey is just randomly in this movie. Like, you know, you're watching Kick-Ass 2, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, there's Jim Carrey. Just not being typical Jim Carrey, but still.
He's like, you can't even say like doing his thing.
It's not
just,
his
hey,
thing
this
at
character
all.
is played by Jim Carrey.
Yep.
I want to shout out Garrett Brown, who plays Kick-Ass's dad, Mr. Lazowski, because he does such a good job. He just loves his son. He's willing to do anything for him. He accepts him for who he is. He's upset that he's a vigilante, but still takes the fall for him. And there's a few key scenes with him just like looking out for his son, and then they have like a falling out where Dave is really rude to him, which I hated because he's like such a sweet guy. He's got such a sweet face. He gets killed in the movie, and it's very sad. But I just think he just did a great job playing like the single father, doesn't have much, but damn it, he loves his son. He calls him like his best friend. It always get me.
Yeah, it's a moment in the movie that, you know, when he is tragically killed, it genuinely kind of hits me where I'm like, oh man, that's why you gotta do that to me? But yeah, he does a really good job in that role. Like I said, it's another kind of a bit part. There's a lot of bit parts in this movie, but he gives it his all, and it all works pretty well.
All right, Andrew, I'm about to group a bunch of characters together because they all play costumed characters, and that's really all you can really say about their performance. So I'm going to run through them all, then we can maybe nitpick a few to add a few notes. But we have Donald Faison playing Dr. Gravity, Augustus Crew playing Todd/Ass Kicker, Lindy Booth playing Night Bitch, Robert Ems plays Insect Man, Stephen McIntosh and Monica Dolan play the team Remembering Tommy. So ridiculous. Tom Wu as Genghis Carnage, Olga Kurkulina as Mother Russia. Andy Nyman plays the Tumor, and Daniel Kaluuya plays Black Death. Again, all these characters, all they're doing is playing a very specific gimmick. So I don't know if we can really dive into like the performance and the psyche,
Right.
but a few big names in there though, like Donald Faison, probably most known from the TV show Scrubs, and we talked about him back on the Josie and the Pussycats episode. So definitely a face that you know.
Yeah.
And Daniel Kaluuya, probably the biggest name of that group I just listed there, star of Get Out and many, many more movies since then. But just playing a small character, a villain this go around named Black Death.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to these guys. There's this like, and there's so many like, I wouldn't say they're like blink it and you miss it type cameos, although there is one Chris's mom is played by Yancey Butler of the Witchblade TV show fame. She has the brief scene where she appears and then dies immediately. But yeah, they're all like one notes. Another one in here that just blows me away is Benedict Wong plays one of the henchmen. Obviously, Wong from the Doctor Strange films.
I knew I
he's
recognized
randomly
him.
in here for literally like seconds. And so obviously this was before Doctor Strange or anything of that nature. But like, it's just like, this one really is full of people where you're like, oh, wait, hey, you, like, wait, now you're gone already. Like, it's genuinely like a bunch of people that like blew up, or like you knew already, but then you're again kind of shocked at how little they're ultimately in the final film. But yeah, a bit of a stacked cast, if you will.
Should say Augustus Prue is playing Dave's friend Todd, another recast, because that was originally Evan Peters in the first Kick-Ass.
Yep.
Which is funny, that first Kick-Ass movie has the two Quicksilvers being buddy-buddy, but I gotta think by 2013, Evan Peters' star was rising a bit, and maybe outgrew the small bit part of Dave's friend.
Well, yeah, Todd's role in this movie is kind of very limited. He has very limited screen time, and his most prominent scene is when his two friends are just needlessly making fun of him. So I can kind of see why that doesn't necessarily appeal to somebody that's trying to kind of move their star up. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, there is a deep cast here.
Heck of a cast, heck of a deep cast. But now it's time to jump into the scenes of this movie, Andrew. Starting with our favorite scene of the movie. Andrew, when is Kick-Ass 2 firing on all cylinders? What would you say is the best scene in the film?
My favorite scene has got to be the finale. It's our big final showdown between Dave, Mindy, and the assembled might of more than just Justice Forever, but all these heroes that they have inspired against Chris's full army of toxic megacons. Sorry, apologies, folks. It's a dirty word. Toxic. You should not say it. But radioactive, much better. But I like the setup here because like Dave and Mindy kind of come in alone, and Chris has just kind of got that again, that just kind of completely unearned hubris that he has the whole film. And then when all the other heroes appear and kind of level the playing field, you can just kind of see like the facade goes away for Chris almost immediately. Where like, oh crap, now that he doesn't, because the scene earlier where like they kill Colonel Stars and Stripes, like it's him and his whole crew. Like there's never a chance that Colonel Stars and Stripes is going to get the upper hand on them. So it's easy for him to have that kind of mindset of like, oh, I don't have anything to be afraid of. I got all my goons doing all my work. This is when the facade is finally gone, and you kind of again see the actor Christopher playing Chris. You kind of get to see his range a little bit because he can switch between those things pretty effortlessly. And then we get obviously the big Gonzo final fight between all of the different groups that ultimately results in Chris getting dismembered by a shark. So any movie that's gonna, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do it, why not? Why not have a shark do it? But yeah, it's kind of the culmination of the whole film. Obviously, Chris's actions of this whole film are all designed to just break down and wear it Kick-Ass. And this is finally it. He's taken everything from Kick-Ass. And now it's just finally time to finish it off. And yeah, it's a really, it's obviously where the movie's building the whole time, but I think it's a really fun, over the top, ridiculous action big scene where we finally get our final showdowns.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. Finale, last big fight, also my favorite scene of the movie. There's plenty of scenes throughout the movie that I enjoy, but this is definitely when the movie's going all out. There's a lot packed into this. It's, designed to be the big climax, so it makes sense that it is your favorite or best scene of the movie.
Right.
I mean, you get the classic team of heroes rushing up against a team of villains. Honestly, I mean, this is before Endgame. Like, there hasn't been that visual on screen very many times before 2013. No. I'm not saying this is the first, but maybe it is.
I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna guess.
I like all the individual pairings that come off from that. Particular Hit Girl versus Mother Russia is really fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because Mother Russia, she is the
a brick shit house.
Super villain. She is ridiculous. She reminds me of like gender swapped Zangia from Street Fighter. Definitely for the obvious Russian garb, and she's dressed like a pro wrestler. And at first, she has the upper hand on Hit Girl until Hit Girl takes adrenaline And you get this really cool action scene of Hit Girl stabbing Mother Russia with these shards of glass, and then she throws a bunch of shards in the air, and at like hyper speed, grabs the shards out of the air and just stabs Mother Russia like all over. Like it's one of those really like over the top violent scenes, but just a cool little visual there at the end of the movie. Good use of adrenaline, which has kind of become a trope in superhero movies, hasn't it? Like a hero taking adrenaline and then going berserk.
Yeah, just that idea that like just injecting yourself with adrenaline suddenly means you're like super amped and strong and not just going to overload your system and put yourself in a coma.
Movies. It's really good. I like there's like a running bit throughout this because we don't even like see the supervillain lair really until this finale. We see a few hints of it as he's building it, but this is like the big unveiling of this big supervillain lair. And I like that he has this giant shark tank, but they think they used the wrong water for the shark because it's just laying on the bottom of a tank, which is very funny to me. You're like, if a super villain, I have to have a shark, and then you screw it up and it's a dead shark.
Yeah.
But when he falls into it at the end, the shark was just biding his time. He just needed food, and he appears to kill the motherfucker. But now, if you stuck around post credits, Andrew, he just gets his legs bitten off and possibly his hands. He's in a hospital bed.
And his junk.
Very pathetic. That's true. He also does make a point to say his junk is gone.
Because we just had to.
Just had to. That's the kind of movie this is. But yeah, it's a fun fight. A bunch of, again, just good, funny little beats. I like seeing all these wacky characters do their thing. And yeah, I agree. Favorite scene in the movie. The movie opens with a bit of a, I guess you could say it's a callback to the first movie. In that first movie, Nicolas Cage, the character Big Daddy, is shooting Hit Girl, who's, how old is she in that first movie? Like 8, 9? I mean, very young. And that was one of those memorable scenes of that first movie, because just the visual of a dad, like, shooting his daughter to test a bulletproof vest is bizarre and absurd. And in this movie, they're doing it, but it's Hit Girl shooting Kick-Ass. So, again, little fun callback there. There's a prominent like portrait of Nick Cage in this movie in like Hit Girl's training area. Do you think they have to pay Nick Cage for that?
I'm curious.
Or like they already have the rights from the first movie.
I would assume there's potentially a rights thing that you would just have to like maybe just like obviously he's not having to act or do anything new, but if you're going to feature him in something, I assume Cage got something for that. Because otherwise, I could just put pictures of anybody and just be like, yeah, this is my picture of Chris Evans that's going to follow me around the whole movie.
But he was in the previous movie, though. Like, I don't know if that makes a difference between that being just like a random person. Like, in like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, there's a portrait of Tommy Lee Jones because he was in the last movie, and I'm always been curious. Like, does he get like an extra like bonus check? Does he get residuals for his portrait being in a movie? I would
assume there's got to be something. Because unless your contract calls for it, I guess. Like, it could have, like, a clause that says, hey, we may use your likeness in a potential sequel, in which case you would be entitled to X, Y, or Z. I don't know, Chris. I'm not a lawyer.
I always expect you to know these things, Andrew.
I'm completely full of shit.
I like, we've kind of touched on already that this movie's tone is a bit different from the first one, and I guess you could say sometimes it's unclear if it's self-aware or being a parody or being a satire or kind of playing it straight and trying to just be like a badass superhero movie. But there's times definitely when it acknowledges the absurdity, and I always like it. I like when Chris D'Amico is talking about like we need to get vengeance on Kick-Ass, and like no one else in the family seems to like care. He just straight up says, he blew up Dad with a bazooka, for God's sakes. Like, because that is how that first movie ends. Like, they shoot the greatest actor of all time, Mark Strong, with a bazooka, and he like flies out the window and explodes like this big over the top thing. And he's like, seems to be the only one who like recognizes just like how absurd that is.
Right, like his mom even says, like, your dad died in a fire, and it's It's like, yeah, like, and then somehow I'm still not entirely sure how he kills his mom by shorting out a tanning bed. Like, I don't, my understanding of electricity, which is above average, you would, I don't see how that works. But yeah,
Probably
he
the
like
most
kicks
unrealistic thing in this entire movie.
yeah, and the entire thing, I think that took me out of it. So I was out of it from like 10 minutes in. It was a tough to get back into. But yeah, I also just like I was like, is that Yancey Butler? And I was like, it is. She's in this movie for 45 seconds. But yeah, it is funny to watch him kind of, and it's like I said, his character arc in this one is interesting because it's just it there is a bit of like he just doesn't see how ridiculous he is. And that's kind of John Leguizamo's job, is to kind of look at him and just be like, what the heck are you doing? Like when he puts on like the BDSM gear and he's like, this is my destiny. And John Leguizamo's like, what? Like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. And thankfully he gets a better costume that's definitely inspired by it, but it's a little bit more, not just a gimp mask. But, they'd save that for the Batman. Yeah, it's an interesting arc because he really does kind of feel like he's got this intense hate for Kick-Ass, rightfully or not. And he just manifests that in very, very increasingly ridiculous ways that he's completely unaware are as ridiculous as they are.
Andrew, this movie does something that was, I'm guessing, pretty new at the time. It has become pretty commonplace, though. When characters text each other, we see their text messages on screen. It's like a little graphic showing us what they're texting each other.
Yep.
How do you feel about that?
It's for in certain, it really kind of depends on like the mood of the film. Like here, I would actually kind of say it's weird. But like if it's like a comedy or something where like the communication is like thing, it just kind of fits in. It's fine. But like here, it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's a way to try to make it visual, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, medium.
I like it overall. There's been times it's been jarring in certain movies, but I like it. I think it works here. I think it's a funny problem that filmmakers like have had to address because like texting has become a very normal way for people to talk to each other. So naturally, your characters are going to text each other, but it doesn't play on film very well. And unless you just keep having these insert shots that are close-ups of their phone, like you've got to convey what they're saying to each other. So like having the words next to them is at first, the first couple times I saw it, I'm like, that's pretty gimmicky, but like, I don't even think twice about it anymore. Like these days, when I see it happen on a TV show or whatever, I'm like, yeah, I guess we have to know what they're saying to each other. This movie does a lot of things, little graphics like that. Like there's very straight off the comic book page, like panels that'll say like later that night for an establishing shot. But one that I really enjoyed was the subtitles. Whenever they break into that ring of sex traffickers and they're speaking another language, they have speech bubbles pointing to the person that's talking, and those are the subtitles. I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, that is fun.
And helpful, honestly.
Yeah, honestly. Now I know who's talking.
I like meeting the team of the superheroes for the first time, and they're kind of swapping like origin stories. And again, I don't know what tone they're going for, but there's something darkly funny to me about the line, I became Night Bitch after my sister was murdered and found at a dumpster.
Yeah.
Night Bitch. So dumb.
I do like a good training montage, and we get at least one of those here, where Dave, because the whole thing about Dave ultimately is that he really doesn't have a lot of ability. He's not like Hit Girl, who's been doing this in her entire life, essentially, as crazy as that makes. At one point he even says, your dad was insane, right? Like the fact that he trained his, child to be a ruthless killer. But she brushes it off, but ultimately assists in training him. They skip school for weeks at a time to basically train, and he gets his skills up, gets his abilities up. By the end of the movie, he's looking real jacked, baby.
Jacked to the tits.
Jacked. Oh man, I love that line.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's first of
Yeah.
all, it's not fair. Second of all, that is not a high school kid. Like, what are we
No.
what are we doing here?
You're like 30.
I like the Minutemen-esque photo from Watchmen of the
Yeah.
of the superheroes
Of the
taking a
Justice
picture of like
Forever.
there's a pretty direct homage that I felt like.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's a running thing through the movie that kind of that idea of like unearned hubris, really. It's not limited to just Chris, really. Because like the heroes kind of have it too. Like Justice Forever is this new thing who are already kind of like, he even when he's hanging out with Dr. Gravity for the first time, Dr. Gravity says he's like, I've never even been in a fight before. Like,
Yeah.
so he's never done anything. So there's this sense of like, we're superheroes, that's enough, really. Like there's that sense of it. And Justice Forever is not excluded from that. Because like you think about like Clark Duke's character, whose name escapes me, like he hasn't fought any crime.
Battle
Like, he
Guy.
doesn't-
How could you
Battle
forget
Guy.
the disrespect to Battle Guy?
You went on a 10-minute rant about how much you hate Clark Duke. Do not give me any shit about this. But that's kind of runs through the whole movie, the idea that like by and large the superheroes drastically overestimate themselves. Like they think by simply being a superhero, like that's enough. And Hit Girl is one of the few who kind of is like, well, no, that's not enough. And Dave kind of again adapts to that and learns it. And like obviously, like some of them, like Colonel Stars and Stripe is a former mafia guy, so he's not like helpless, but even he gets caught off hand and it ends up costing him. So it's it's an interesting little thread throughout the film.
It's interesting that for most of this movie, Hit Girl is not Hit Girl. She quits the game pretty early on. She has like one action scene as Hit Girl where she's training Dave, and then she hangs up the costume and doesn't become Hit Girl again until the very end of the movie. So the movie has to like come up with clever ways to continue to show us her as Hit Girl. Like she tries out for the dance team and she doesn't know how to dance. So instead she imagines that she's taking out 4 attackers and she does like a fight choreography. And we see her doing the fight as Hit Girl, while of course the people in the movie just see her as Mindy. It's pretty clever. My favorite one is, she's struggling with her identity and who she should be. And there was one where she just looks in the mirror and she sees herself in the Hit Girl costume. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, they definitely get creative with that, especially, like I said, that idea that, like, her adapting to just trying to be a normal, like, hell, that scene where all the girls are, like, watching that music video of the dude, and all of a sudden she's, like, starts feeling things, and she's like, whoa, what is this? Like,
J Union, I think, is the name of that boy band. And that is some super... You could tell me that was an actual music video of an actual boy band. I'm like, oh yeah, probably. Like, it's definitely, like, parody, because they don't exist, but, like, how can you tell the difference between a parody boy band music video and a real boy band music video, right?
It's a little tough to find the balance there.
Yeah. I like her little Mean Girls-esque side story, though, where the popular girls take her in, and then they leave her in the woods with this big prank, which I'm literally, my note says, so they trick her by having this jock take her out on a date. He takes her to the middle of the woods, and all the popular people are there, and they're like, psych, there's no party here. And they say, date ditch, and everyone leaves, and they leave her stranded in the middle of the woods. And my notes just say, punch her in the face. Like, you are Hit Girl. I know you're capable. Take her out. And I know that's not the point of the scene. She's getting hurt emotionally. I get it. But man, they did a good job of making me, like, hate this popular girl.
Right. If it's one thing the movie does do well, it's you hate these people.
One of my... I had to make a note of this line. She gets her revenge on the popular girls, and she walks up, and the popular girls are about to do the same thing to another girl. They're going to take her in and pretend like she's part of the group.
Yeah.
And she goes up and she, like, saves that girl, from getting involved in that. And she tells her, you don't need these axe wounds. I had to, like... I was watching the movie with a friend of the show, my wife, and I was like, did she just call them axe wounds? And that was very funny to me, Andrew. But I gotta say, there's something about, that first movie where she's like a little kid, and she's like killing people and being a badass, and cursing like a sailor and insulting people and cutting them down. There's obviously satire there. There's funny. It's a juxtaposition of a little kid that we consider innocent saying these things. But now that she's playing like a high schooler, like a 15-year-old, it comes off a bit different. When a 15-year-old is saying, "Game on, cocksuckers," you're like, all right, you're a 15-year-old calling people cocksuckers. Like there's no like, it loses a layer of I don't know what of comedy of satire. I don't know what you call it, but it just comes off different.
It does, because the first movie, I think the whole point is the juxtaposition of what's happening versus the age of the character. And for this one, it's just like, okay, now she's a high school, like she's the same age Dave was essentially in the first movie, or if roughly. And so it's like, well, okay, now this isn't that weird. So part of that juxtaposition is just gone. And so I think it does hit differently. Now that does seem to be kind of part of the story, or at least what they're trying to imply by having her kind of try to face, all this effort made to make her a killing machine. They kind of forgot to teach her to just kind of exist, like a normal kid. And so that's kind of the idea there. But yeah, it definitely does hit differently.
Another, probably maybe my second favorite action scene is Mother Russia's big scene, where the whole gang, they go to attack Night Bitch because they know she's romantically involved with Kick-Ass. And first of all, the visual of the toxic mega cunts walking down the street in their costumes in broad daylight is so goofy. Because like they think they look badass, but they're just like cosplayers walking down a sunny street.
They could be anything.
But Mother Russia, who's genuinely, I think, a pretty cool and fun character, she stands guard, and she like murders all the cops that show up with just really over the top ways. Like she throws a propane tank into the car to blow them up to get the whole thing started. She puts a lawnmower on the back of a police car and reverses into another car. The lawnmower goes to the windshield and chops the guy. It's very violent, very over the top, and dare I say, pretty fun. And I like that during the scene, the Tetris theme is playing like in the score, and it's not really, that song is a traditional Russian song. I had to look up the name, and I'm probably not gonna say it right, but Korobaniki. I don't know. The song existed before Tetris, but Tetris obviously popularized it. That do 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 bam bam bam. Yeah, that's the score playing because she's Mother Russia, and they're really leaning into it, and it's pretty fun. Maybe my second favorite action scene in the movie. I was kind of rooting for Mother Russia.
Yeah,
she's like, if they for whatever reason rebooted Rocky IV specifically, she could be Brigitte Nielsen's character.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I also like, we get a little peek into like the financials here, because the cops show up and the other bad guys are like, leave it to Mother Russia, she makes 10 times what we do. And just the idea like they had to pay her more, but she's worth it. This is really fun.
Because when you got, what good is the money if you're not going to spend it?
I mean, I gotta say, overall, I mean, this podcast isn't about ranking things, but I'll say, still to this day, I haven't rewatched the first Kick-Ass, but I would probably say it's a better movie than this one still. But I think watching this movie years later, and not in theaters, this is the highly anticipated sequel to the movie I really enjoyed, I think it was a lot easier to find things to like, and individual scenes that really stand out, and performances I like a lot more, regardless of how it all comes together. Just kind of divorcing it from like that pressure of being the follow-up and being the sequel. I think it's a good time. I think at the very least, if you enjoy that first movie, there's probably some stuff in the second movie you're going to enjoy, even if it doesn't ultimately top the original or anything. It's still a very specific brand of humor and look at comic book characters, and at some parts at least, I think it's still clicking. It's still working. There's some stuff I enjoy here.
Yeah, I think I definitely like. I think you obviously the cast is all back, by and large, mostly. They're back as these characters. I think Moretz's Hit Girl is definitely worth the price of admission alone. I think that's I think there's definitely things to like.
Well, Andrew, how would you say that this movie functions as an adaptation of its source material? I personally haven't read any of the Kick-Ass series, but I'm sure you're a little bit more familiar with it than I am. Do you think it's a pretty faithful adaptation of those books?
I think this feels a lot more like the Mark Millar comics of the page, whereas the first movie, I think, was taking the concepts and the ideas and kind of forming them into this different thing that still felt like it was paying homage to what it came from. This one feels like it's a much more straight adaptation of this is the page to the screen, like a villain called the Motherfucker, the Toxic Mega Cunts, all that kind of stuff. That's right off the page into the comic, and it's played mostly straight by and large. Like these things are not, they're just kind of thrown up there. So if the kind of hyper excess Miller style writing is your thing, I think Kick-Ass 2 is definitely going to be up your alley, because I feel like it is much more taking that from the page to the screen a lot more directly than the first movie is, even if I do still think the first movie might be the stronger of the two. But yeah, it's an interesting experiment. It really is, because the first movie, like I said, feels like it's taking the concepts and finding a new way, whereas the sequel feels like it really is just taking straight from the page. So it's an interesting thing to look at and compare.
All right, Andrew, another fucking episode in the books. I got to get it out of my system while we have this free range.
Yeah. You got to understand that when you're fucking talking about a movie like this fucking movie, that there's really only so much shit you can go through before you finally have to wrap it all up.
Good shit. All right.
Good stuff. Good shit. The best fucking shit in the world.
Real gourmet shit there.
Balls.
All right, let's jump into question of the week. Man, I'm glad our podcast is edited. I like our normal. This is horrible.
Yeah. We're forcing this so bad.
All right, here's our question of the week. It comes from Fridge Boy, who submitted this on our Discord. Oh boy, it's a heck of a question, Andrew. They ask, how would insert superhero of your choice here handle anti-maskers? I gotta say, where my mind immediately goes is like to the extreme. Like I think of like Judge Dredd, right? Black and white, no nonsense.
Yep.
If the law says you gotta wear a mask, he's killing you or arresting you or whatever the most extreme version is. He's taking you down. No sympathy, no questions asked.
Yep.
I think of
no questions.
Rorschach from The Watchmen, another very black and white character. He'll, rip your throat out if you don't have a mask on. Yeah, most extreme, right? Not a lot of nuance there. That's where my mind immediately goes when I think of superheroes dealing with anti-maskers.
Yep, I agree. I think that happens. I think that's an easy thing to go to. I think there's definitely some less dark ones. I feel like the Flash would just put masks on everybody. There's not. He would just like run, like before you know it, you'd be like, "What the hell?"
It's the most passive aggressive thing. They have like the Flash logo on it.
Yeah, the Flash logo, or just to mess with people, they would be the Green Lantern logo instead. But Green Lantern could just create masks for everybody. Just be like, "All right, there you go." Now you can't even take that mask off. What now?
I think.
I feel like Superman would give a speech.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you. How he?
I
think he would like try to educate people.
I think he would. I think he would definitely try to be like, "Hey, this isn't just about you; it's about other people." And he would try to engage through empathy, because that's what Superman does.
Nice.
Captain America would probably have a similar approach.
I think by and large, most superheroes, I think this is like below their pay grade. Like someone, like I mean, if you're in a place that requires a mask or asks you to wear a mask, the nice thing to do is wear a mask, and I would encourage that. But like, I don't think a superhero is going to get involved. I think they're dealing with much higher things. But I like the idea of Superman. Like, I like the wholesome approach of your take there.
Yeah,
my mind went to the people that murder him, but you're talking about people that are truly being superheroes.
They would. But yeah, you like somebody like Batman. I just can't see him caring. Like,
really, no.
Batman would be like, I have so much other crap.
I guess the question is though, would would the superheroes wear a mask as a superhero? I mean, if Batman's like outside fighting crime in an alley, I don't know, he probably don't wear a mask, but like, what if he has to be Batman in, I can't think of a scenario where he would be around people, but like, would he have like a modified, like a Batman Beyond type mask?
Sure, why
Yeah,
not?
I guess
Just
so.
do the whole face at that point. A lot of super, like the Flash has definitely had masks like that. Green Lantern, not hard to make yourself something full face. Like, I would imagine they would.
I feel like Superman would wear like the blue, like the regular ass blue hospital mask, like
Surgical
the
mask.
same mask everybody else
he
wears.
would.
He's like, look,
He
I'm
would
wearing it.
he would be empathizing with the first responders. That's what
Yeah.
Superman does. I feel like, again, Captain America would do the same.
Yeah, nice. That's a nice wholesome place to end this very strange,
Strange
graphic,
episode.
violent,
Yeah.
curse-filled episode. Yeah, let's wrap this fucking thing up, Andrew.
Get the fuck out of here.
If you want to ask us a question, you can hop into our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. If you haven't joined us already, please do. It's a fun place to hang out with the community and talk about whatever the heck you want. Ask us those questions. Write in about movies we're going to cover in the future. If you want to know upcoming episodes, we will let you know there in the Discord. A good place to stay engaged with the show. If you would be so kind, head over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review for this show. It's something fast, free, and fun that you can do that we certainly appreciate. We'll read that review on a future episode, and I always ask you to go one step farther. Leave a review for every podcast that you listen to regularly. It's just, you know what? It's the nice thing to do. And remember, maybe not every goddamn movie is great.
But all fucking movies have greatness.
So dumb. Thank you to Mark motherfucking Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Fuck you. You know, you got your Pib in you. All jacked up on Mr. Pibb.
That recorded, so you'll have that soundbite available at your disposal.
Andrew, kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Kick-Ass 2?
I'm gonna go ahead and give it to Chloe Glate. Yeah.
Fuck!
Shit. Oh. God damn it.
He does like this fake strain of his voice saying, he's like, yeah. I can't even do it. I'm cutting this whole thing. I can't do it. But I hate the way this guy talks. I don't like this guy.
Just
I'll clean that up. I'll clean it up in post. I don't like him. All right.
Turning into the Predator.
Thanks to Mitch, the bitch of Depressed to fucking Impress. It's so horrible.
This is terrible.
Thanks. How old are we?
Oh my God.
Words. Thanks to
We've literally turned into 9-year-olds. Like, we're just ridiculous.